No, I have not spoken to Democratic leadership. I am a liberated Democrat.
Now,
we're looking at Democratic leadership right here.
That's right.
A few moments later.
Long time, multi-term Democratic Congressman Al Green will be defeated by a primary challenger, Christian Menefee, much younger.
So let's now discuss the Democrat side of the Texas runoff elections tonight, because we can hilariously report to you that the political career of Representative Al Green, which has allegedly been going on since about 4000 BC, historic cave paintings say that he actually crossed the Bering Strait land bridge in order to become the first congressman on the American continent. But nonetheless, he is now being retired today after effectively not only did Democrats stab him in the back, and this is a pretty hilarious story we have to tell, because after historically have been receiving a bunch of support from the Congressional Black Caucus, he claims he was a civil rights leader or something back in the day. I don't know. You'd have to consult the cave paintings on that one. But even other Democrats that you would think would have his back, like Jasmine Crockett, were not going for him anymore. Turns out that his constant impeachments and antics in the middle of the State of the Union were not actually improving his image with the voters. But secondly, this is another place where I think the Texas redistricting somehow doesn't get enough credit, because not only did it add new Republican seats, it managed to miraculously end the careers of two of the absolute worst people in Congress, that of course being Jasmine Crockett and Al Green, who hilariously could not unite here, and they handed victory to the other Democrat, who I'm not exactly going to say is much better. It looks like Al Green simply passing the torch on to a younger, insane race communist. But nonetheless, I do want to tell you the story of the collapse of his career today, because it is quite funny. And at the end of the day, I suppose that the voters decided they did not want to have a 80, 90, 100-year-old congressman sitting there and embarrassing himself every day. Although I have to say, that does appear to be a little bit contradictory to me, because after all, Al Green is simply the median age of the average No Kings protester. Am I wrong on that? Right? I mean, no wonder he's the one always doing the No Kings protest in the middle of the State of the Union. He is them. So it's quite hilarious to watch, Democrats, literally their whole party is just a gerontocracy, but and on random off moments, they magically turn on that stuff. But we'll talk about it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, I feel it would be appropriate, before we discuss the results tonight, to do a quick little memorial on the best moments of Al Green's career, which of course include getting thrown out of the State of the Union 2 years in a row and impeaching Trump about 10 million different times for the dumbest of reasons, including dastardly deeds, whatever that's supposed to mean. But this guy, on some extent, I'd like to say won't be missed, but I'll be honest, I'm kind of going to miss him a bit. I will miss how much he just perfectly embodied everything the Democrat Party is still about.
Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
I know what happened in my lifetime when I had to go to the back door to get my food. I remember when I had to drink from a filthy colored water fountain, when there was a pristine white water fountain right next to me. I know. I lived it. I remember how I had to sit in the back of the bus. And if there weren't enough seats for Anglos, we called them white people. I don't like the term. But when there weren't enough seats for Anglos, then I had to move. I know what's going on. I see it. Well, you're saying no, that's not happening right now. No. But we're headed in that direction. We're headed in that direction. I don't want to return to that past where I was a suspect simply because of the color of my skin. I was a suspect. We are now at a point in this country to tie this together, where there are people who are suspect because of the way they look, just as I was a suspect because of the way I looked. If you are Latino,
you know, my favorite part of that speech has always been when he's talking about segregation and he addresses, hey, are we there yet? Is that happening right now? No, but it could happen, but we could get there. You understand that's the most meaningless, stupid statement ever. I mean, what do you even want us to do about that, right? We're all dying. Oh, we're not all dying, but we could all die, guys. Okay, what do you want us to do about that, though, right? But this is the typical nonsense. Just because he's a geriatric, just because he's been around since 4000 BC and he's going senile, you know, Democrats for a long time have believed that, oh, well, you know, he lived through segregation, which means he's a civil rights leader, obviously, and you have to listen to him about literally everything, which is just not the case. It's never been the case, but, you know, the games they play. What's quite hilarious, though, is that in this case, they did not listen to their own civil rights leader when it came to the election itself, because as of tonight, we can report that this other Democrat, a younger guy by the name of Christian Menefee, won this primary runoff by a whopping about 37 points. You can see the results here, and ladies and gentlemen, they are not close. I guess you could compare this to segregation or something. Take a listen.
A jarring one to see, I think, just in terms of where expectations were. Green won Fort Bend in a landslide in the preliminary, getting crushed by Menefee here in his home base. And again, that's Harris County. And so our decision desk is saying that long-time Democratic incumbent Al Green, he, among other things, if you watch the State of the Union address every year, he's often prominent there for a variety of reasons. But Al Green losing here to Christian Menefee. So one incumbent had to go. Our decision desk says Al Green will be that incumbent.
So yeah, a total landslide defeat, an embarrassing one at that within his own party, which is interesting because don't they know he's a respected civil rights leader or something like that? Don't they know he's not an ape because he held up the sign in the State of the Union that says he's not an ape? Stop treating him badly. You know, he's been around for 4,000 years. He's been around since the woolly mammoth was still here. Why would you do this to such a respected civil rights leader, guys? Funny how that works. But I think it's important to understand the actual reasons why Al Green lost, because I find this to be pretty interesting. And first and foremost, as we said in the beginning, maybe the primary factor that contributed to this was, of course, the Texas redistricting, because basically what they did is there's those two districts in the Houston area, they fused them into one. But the thing is, that includes parts of Al Green's own historic home district. And as you heard them point out there, Al Green also lost his own district. So it's quite hilarious because you can make the excuse that, oh, it's because they drew my district out. Well, you lost your own people as well, which is really funny because let's not forget, what was Al Green's district? One of these majority-minority Voting Rights Act mandated DEI affirmative action districts. And what I find to be hysterical is the moment his voters were basically given an alternative option, right? You understand? They weren't forced to vote for Al Green because they're in a racially gerrymandered district. They said, screw that. We don't want this guy. We're going to go vote for someone we actually do like. You know, really funny how that works. But as I've said for a long time, Democrats were using the Voting Rights Act to rig and gerrymander our own so-called quote-unquote democracy. And Al Green is actually a prime example of that, right? He was a DEI congressman, not just because he's from a DEI district, but you also see, right, when the voters are given a real legitimate choice in an actual district that's not rigged, not DEI, not unfair, not racially drawn, even in a majority black area, they vote for the other guy. That's too good. That's too good. And again, he marched with Martin Luther King or something, don't you know? And even before that, right? He was marching with the Iroquois Indians in 2000 BC. But okay, so you had that. But I think what's also very interesting about this is the way in which the actual black Democrats effectively stabbed this guy in the back. For example, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, as one example, as well as I believe the Black Progressive Caucus, actually handed their endorsement over to the other incumbent, right, from the other district that it fused with, this guy by the name of Menefee, or Menefee, I should say there. But perhaps the most ironic twist of it all is, you want to know who else betrayed him? You want to know who else ended up trying to get Democrat voters to go for the much younger guy who has been around for less than several thousand years? That is the one and only Jasmine Crockett. Take a look at this.
General.
I'm Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. We need a new generation of fighters who are ready to throw down for what's right. My friend Christian Menefee is that fighter. Christian Menefee took on MAGA in Texas and won. In Congress, I see him doing the work firsthand every single day. Y'all, on May 26th, I need you to vote for Congressman Christian Menefee.
Protect Progress is responsible for the content of this ad.
It do be your own. It be your own people, don't it? And you would think that Jasmine Crockett would have a lot more sympathy for, number one, a respected civil rights leader, highly respected. But then secondly, perhaps someone who likewise, just like her, got drawn out of her own district due to the removing of racially gerrymandered maps in the state of Texas, but apparently no. And you notice the insinuation there that I found to be quite hilarious. Jasmine is basically saying that Al Green is too old. That's what it's really about. She doesn't say it directly, but she says what? We need a new generation of leadership, implying that the 80-year-old congressman needs to go, and Democrats shouldn't seek leadership from people who are 100 years old, especially 120 years old like Al Green.
Al Green and I are about the same age. At almost 80 years old, he has been in public office for almost 50 years. It's time to pass the torch. Congressman Christian Menefee beat MAGA in court. Now he's taking the fight to Washington. It's time for a new generation. Christian Menefee, the fighter we need in Congress. Endorsed by Jasmine Crockett.
Now, I have to say, I am a little bit upset because I feel like the Democrats stole our thing. You know, that was our joke, calling him the caveman. My friend, Black Conservative Perspective, called him Homo erectus, which is something I still laugh about to this day. You know, and we always used to say, look at this guy, look at this fossil in Congress, what a fool he is. But then suddenly the Democrats stole our talking point. You know, suddenly they also noticed Al Green is old. I mean, I don't know. I guess we were just ahead of the curve on that one. But let's also be honest about this. And yeah, it is notable. He's been in Congress 50 years. Like, all of our jokes about him being around since the Paleolithic period aside, he actually has been in Congress for 50 years. That's insane. And, you know, he's not the only one like this, but we do notice a pattern there, okay? But anyways, I have to be honest, though. I don't think it's actually about his age. Let's be real. Let's really define what happened here. Al Green probably lost the confidence of Democrat leadership, and this happened quite publicly, as a matter of fact, after he continued to embarrass the party, especially in the second Trump presidency. Because you remember, the whole thing he did at the State of the Union, especially last year, which was even more significant, they had to stop the speech. That was not a good look for Democrats. That was even something that you remember in the post show, even on MSNBC, they're talking about, I don't know if that was a good look. So probably you could imagine Democrat leadership says, this guy has to stop. He has to go. He's a really embarrassing look for us. This, you know, totally like old caveman, crazy looking lunatic who's always screaming, interrupting Trump. And that's what Americans see of our party. And then he doesn't stop with the behavior. You know, he tries to impeach Trump still a million times, even in the second presidency. Did the same thing, by the way, back during the first term. He does the same thing at the second State of the Union. I think really what happened here is Democrats basically said, this guy is a liability, and if, you know, basically he gets his district thrown out due to Texas redistricting, we're not going to do anything to save him, okay? He has to go, and even Jasmine Crockett's getting up there going for the other person. I think that's what it's really about, right? Which is quite interesting and ironic, because I thought Democrats were supposed to be all about no kings, but you notice how when they realize what an optical disaster their own behavior is, they basically throw you under the bus for it after once celebrating you as a hero, or in Al Green's case, a highly respected civil rights leader, or whatever they say about him. So there you effectively have it. Now, I will say on the flip side, it doesn't seem like this Menefee guy is all that much better. I think his politics are just as radical, if not potentially even more radical than Al Green. Green's, but I think maybe the reason why, to an extent, he'll almost be more dangerous is because he probably will act. I'm going to take a wild guess. He's probably going to act a little bit smarter than Green, right? He's not going to go publicly and make as big a fool out of himself and disgrace the entire Democrat Party on a regular basis, which is honestly kind of unfortunate, right? Because I like when the crazy people show how crazy they are, but the smart crazy people, as you sometimes see, know when to stay quiet, and that appears to be this Menefee guy, and he's much younger, so in a sense, Al Green really did pass the torch, okay, to the younger generation. Like in pro wrestling, when typically it's tradition to lose your final match, so that way you put the new guy over and the new guy becomes the star, right? Passing the torch and stuff like that. Same thing happened here. I don't think we're getting anything much better, but the good news at least is we have one crazy Democrat in the Houston area instead of those two that were there before. So that's positive news. That's a good development out of redistricting. And it is hilarious to watch Al Green lose, although I have to be honest, I'm gonna kind of miss him at the same time. The guy was quite entertaining. And I mean, it is a privilege, is it not? You watch a guy who's been basically trapped in permafrost for the last 40,000 years, but due to global warming, he walks out of the Siberian ice and becomes a congressman in the United States, right? All right, I'm done. See you guys later. God bless. Like and subscribe, and peace.